Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Today I'm going to talk in a separate video, not connected to the Ukraine war, although interestingly you probably can connect it in some way to aid to Ukraine or the lack thereof. I'm going to talk about something that I think is the most worrying thing I have heard from a US politician's mouth in ever, maybe, in terms of long-term destructive implications for US democracy. This is the single worst speech, if you want to call it, set of claims, kind of manifesto that I could possibly imagine if I was a US citizen that was really concerned about democracy, about the Constitution, about the threat of democratic backsliding. Honestly, this would give me a heart attack. This is absolutely terrible. Okay. And I'm not saying this because I'm not a fan of Trump. If anyone came out and actually said these words, if I was a fan of them, I'd be reassessing my evaluation of them. This honestly is an absolute shocker. Right, let's go through what he has said.
My plan to dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy from Washington corruption once and for all.
He hasn't said anything yet. He's talking about dismantling the deep state. Deep state is some kind of nebulous idea of something, and it's a bit of a talking point, particularly on the right wing, that it's the deep state that's actually ruling the country, and the president or the administration is just beholden to the deep state. What he's just about to say on the back of this idea of dismantling the deep state, which essentially is amounts to nothing other than installing himself in as a dictator. What he's about to say is entirely not only what people like Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin have kind of said, but it's what they've done. We have seen democratic backsliding in Russia. I mean, it's a full-on dictatorship now. And in Viktor Orban's Hungary has been democratically backsliding since Orban has been in power. And the EU is so worried about that they've withheld all sorts of funding. Now, what Trump says here is entirely what you'd expect from Orban. And if we are prepared to slag off Viktor Orban for saying and doing things like this, then there needs to be unity in condemnation of this even from Republicans and even from Trumpist Republicans. Surely you recognize you can't have the double standards to attack people like Viktor Orban and not attack someone like Donald Trump for what he says. And this is what he says.
And corruption it is. First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively.
What is a rogue bureaucrat? This is really subjective stuff. This is basically saying, and he says, I will wield this power aggressively. I am going to aggressively get rid of anyone. Who is a rogue? Someone that disagrees with me. Someone that has some idea of a vision that isn't in concordance with mine. So no matter who you are in government, you will just be ousted. Okay. Not crazily problematic. It does depend what rogue is defined as, but you would expect people to come into government and get rid of people who disagree with them. Look at what Donald Tusk is doing. But if these are getting rid of checks and balances for you as a president so that you can then install things that fully align with your position and ideology in a way that you are removing those checks and balances going forward, then this becomes a problem.
Second, we will clean out all of the corrupt actors in our national security and intelligence apparatus. Okay.
This is potentially circular reasoning. You are assuming the thing you are trying to prove, or you are just assuming, you're making an assumption straight off the bat. It's assuming that the intelligence services are corrupt. Are they? What's the evidence of that? Is this because you have been investigated before and the intelligence services have been involved in that? That is kind of their job. if you're just going to clean out the intelligence services so that they are unable to independently investigate things, if they are trying to hold you to account, then that's a problem.
And I will wield that power very aggressively. Second, we will clean out all of the corrupt actors in our national security and intelligence apparatus, and there are plenty of them. The departments and agencies that have been weaponized will be completely overhauled.
This idea that they've been weaponized when they're merely trying to stop wrongdoing happening. I mean, this whole approach assumes that he can do no wrong, and so therefore, if he, and we'll come on to this because of his talk about immunity. He wants to be immune. In fact, we'll get onto that now. He's previously said he wants to be immune, and if the very people who are the only people really that can hold you to account for breaking the law have been got rid of, and you're changing the situation so that you can't even be held accountable for your actions, then you are holding yourself above the law. You're holding yourself above the Constitution. You're holding yourself above kind of democratic accountability. In fact, let's go and look a little bit at that. So this is what he said as an interjection here.
You have to have a guaranteed immunity for a president. Otherwise, a president's not going to be able to function. They're not going to move. Harry Truman would not have done Hiroshima, Nagasaki, probably ended the war, probably, I think so. But he wouldn't have done it. So many things wouldn't be done. The president has to have immunity.
Imagine if he was Hillary Clinton saying that. Imagine he was Obama saying that. Imagine he was Biden saying that. How would Republicans react if a Democrat had said that? It'd be absolute pandemonium.
If they don't have immunity, you're not going to have a presidency much. You're not going to have much of a country.
Well, that's complete nonsense because there hasn't been immunity up until now, and you've had a country. Thank you very much.
So let's be clear. What Trump is describing is leadership with no checks on those in power. But here in the United States, we have a rule of law that applies to everyone. That's why 4 grand juries indicted the ex-president in 4 separate criminal cases. And he's got a few civil cases he's dealing with as well. All the while, Trump's 2024 presidential campaign is moving full steam ahead. The GOP primary is now down to 2 candidates, and the twice impeached, 4 times indicted ex-president is looking like he's all but secured the party's nomination.
So essentially, he doesn't want to be investigated. He doesn't want to be up in court. He is being, he would claim it's a witch hunt, but he has been, he's been found liable in one and found also liable for defamation. And it's not looking good in all these other ones that are going forward as well. You can't just change your rules and say, and I'm immune from the law. But that's genuinely what he wants to do. So he wants to be immune from the law and then wants to clear out all the intelligence services who thinks might be against him for breaking the law, that might investigate him. He wants to clear them out and I would presume replace them with lackeys following his every command.
So that faceless bureaucrats will never again be able to target and persecute conservatives, Christians, or the left's political enemies, which they're doing now at a level that nobody can believe.
Again, what's he talking about? A level that nobody can believe. His stuff he says whenever he wants to fill sentences in. Just complete nonsense. But of course, this kind of scaring people, creating the intelligence services as bogeymen here in some nebulous claim that, bring in Christians. So if you're a Christian watching that, suddenly you're like, oh my God, yeah, persecution. It's a persecution complex. And it's like, yeah, if they're after you, and it's up to me to clear out the intelligence services so they don't get you, good Christians and conservatives. They're after conservatives. They're after Christians. That's absolute nonsense.
Even possible. Third, we will totally reform FISA courts, which are so corrupt that the judges seemingly do not care when they are lied to in warrant applications.
Wow. Now what you're seeing is what happened under the PIS in Poland and has happened under Orban in Hungary, which is the ruling administrations clearing out the judiciaries, changing the judiciaries and having power over the legal system so that they're no longer independent. This is really, really worrying. This is dictator speak here.
Which are so corrupt that the judges seemingly do not care when they are lied to in warrant applications. So many judges have seen so many applications that they know were wrong, or at least they must have known. They do nothing about it. They're
And all he's talking about is himself here.
lied to. Fourth, to expose the hoaxes and abuses of power that have been tearing our country apart, we will establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to declassify and publish all documents on deep state spying, censorship, and corruption.
He wouldn't know what truth was if it hit him around the face with a wet fish. I mean, goodness me, truth and reconciliation. What is he talking about? Let's just go through that again.
Fourth, to expose the hoaxes and abuses of power that have been tearing our country apart, we will establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to declassify and publish all documents on deep state spying, censorship, and corruption. And there are plenty of them. Fifth, we will launch...
That is, we will publish anything that suits my agenda. This won't be publishing everything in the deep state, because I'm sure there's an awful lot that the quote unquote deep state has that concerns Trump and would have him in a negative light. You can bet your bottom dollar that Truth and Reconciliation wouldn't be out in the public domain.
A major crackdown on government leakers who collude with the fake news to deliberately weave false narratives and to subvert our government and our democracy.
So now he's cracking down on whistleblowers. So if you are in government, imagine you're in government when Trump's in charge and you want to leak something that is absolutely terrible, or it depends where. There's a difference obviously between leaking and whistleblowing. But this is obviously you want a tight ship when you're in government, but this is cracking down on any ability to have dissent, to get information out there about what's really going on behind closed doors. It's just such a worry.
Fifth, we will launch a major crackdown on government leakers who collude with the fake news to deliberately weave false narratives and to subvert our government and our democracy. When possible, we will press criminal charges. Sixth, we will make every Inspector General's office independent and physically separated from the departments they oversee, so they do not become the protectors of the deep state. Seventh,
that is something that, without any detail on that, it sounds, pretty reasonable, having independent adjudication and evaluation of departments from outside of those departments. Of course, what he's really trying to do is have some kind of quasi-independent, I would assume here, and this is my speculation, some kind of quasi-independent oversight over something like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And it's like, no, you can't do that. And these independent people are saying that, but who have we put in this independent? Scott Pruitt again, or some, it's like fox in the chicken coop. So I would imagine this is ripe for abuse.
I will ask Congress to establish an independent auditing system to continually monitor our intelligence agencies to ensure they are not spying on our citizens or running disinformation campaigns against the American people, or that they are not spying on someone's campaign like they spied on my campaign.
This whole thing it's all about him. Of course, it's all about him. It's like, how can I stay in power longer? How can I not have people finding out about stuff that I'm doing? How can I not have checks and balances for what I do? How can I not be held accountable for what I do? How can I get away with breaking the law myself? And how can I not be held accountable by intelligence services while I'm going to snoop on the snoopers and stop them, having already cleared them out anyway? It's just, these are all things you put in place if you want to become a dictator. This is what this is.
Eighth, we will continue the effort launched by the Trump administration to move parts of the sprawling federal bureaucracy to new locations outside the Washington swamp. Just as I moved the Bureau of Land Management to Colorado, as many as 100,000 government positions could be moved out, and I mean immediately, of Washington to places filled with patriots who love America, and they really do love America.
I just want to, not so much talking about moving people outside of Washington. You can talk about how that's not a bad idea, potentially. Devolution in some sense. But his idea of draining the swamp from 2016, I think I wrote many times in many articles about how he promised to drain the swamp, but then just drowned himself in it. Just surrounded himself by the swamp, lathered himself on the dirty waters of the swamp. When you look at the people he put in place, Rex Tillerson and, Scott Pruitt and all these people, the people that he drafted into those positions of authority in his own administration, you understand that he did the opposite of wanting to drain a swamp. Is one of the biggest myths of his administration, or biggest lies before he got in, and then during his administration, that it was in any way draining the swamp. It was absolutely not.
Ninth, I will work to ban federal bureaucrats from taking jobs at the companies they deal with and that they regulate. So they deal with these companies and they regulate these companies, and then they want to take jobs from these companies.
This is fantastic. This is definitely something that should happen. I wonder what his genuine agenda is there, and I wonder what beef he has that makes him say this, because everything tracks back to him. So everything that he is claiming should happen will have a benefit to him personally. He's that transactional, right? Here, it would be something like if you've watched Dope Sick on Disney Plus, which is looking at the Purdue Pharma controversy, where they were given the ability to sell certain things, to put things on that. Is the FDA gave them a leaflet for one of their drugs that was essentially, not true. And you're like, oh, well, how did that get through? And then you realize that someone from the FDA ends up going and getting a job sitting on the Purdue Pharma board or whatever. And you're like, oh, okay, I see how this works. So you get the thing you want from the FDA, and then you give them a nice job. So that kind of setup, it definitely needs to be looked at. I just wonder, and I'm not trying to be difficult when this is a good thing in principle, but just knowing how Trump operates, I will be questioning why he's trying to say this.
Finally, I will push a constitutional amendment to impose term limits on members of Congress. This is how I will shatter the deep state and restore government that is controlled by the people and for the people. Thank you very much. It didn't work that way. Such a public display cannot go on, and it's taking place all the time, like with Big Pharma. Finally, I will push a constitutional amendment to impose term limits on members of Congress. This is how I will shatter the deep state and restore government that is controlled by the people and for the people. Thank you very much.
So this is quite interesting because he wants to impose term limits on members of Congress, so that they can't basically rule forever. But this is an interesting position for him to take, because actually there is an argument that he wants to change the Constitution, like he's saying there, in order to allow himself to rule without term limits. So here we have him speaking recently, I believe, in Iowa.
But nobody had to call me because I made the commitment, and we kept you first in the nation. As long as I have anything to say about it, and that we have a good chance of saying for 4 years, we'll have a lot to say about it, 4 years and beyond.
4 years and beyond. Lots of people getting a bit jittery about that, and he has talked previously about wanting to rule for longer. I've said when that's come up in conversation previously that this would be more to do with he kind of wants to rule forever because he knows that as soon as he stops ruling, he'll be done in court. It's a bit like, Putin or any dictator that rules for a long time. They never retire peacefully to sit in their mansion. They normally get ousted and then they're done in court or they're assassinated or whatever. So that's why dictators, partly why they want to rule forever, keep on ruling and ruling, because there's no safe ending to their tenure. Well, this is kind of the same with Trump, is that he wanted to keep ruling and ruling. He didn't want to lose the 2020 elections because he knew he'd be in such legal hot water. Well, that legal hot water is taken a lot longer than people had thought, but is now catching up with him. So he desperately wants to be president so that he has immunity from all these court cases, so that he has impunity to do what he wants without concern about legal ramifications. And then he'll want to keep going and keep ruling past his 2-term limit so that that doesn't come and catch up with him. It's a real challenge, I think, to constitutional norms, what Trump is saying here. And, wanting complete and total immunity is an absolute anathema to those who are really up for transparent democracy and for being held accountable. And you can argue for adhering to the Constitution as well. So Donald Trump provoked outrage with an all capitals 2 a.m. post on his Truth Social platform in which he